Before we get into the list, I want you to understand something. The watch industry is one of the most effective status machines ever invented. Brands spend decades teaching people what a name is worth. They build heritage stories. They sponsor James Bond. They put their watches on the wrists of astronauts and race car drivers and heads of state. By the time you walk into that boutique, you have been pre-sold before anyone said a word to you, and it worked brilliantly for a very long time. Then the internet happened, and the mystique around watches dropped. Some watch brands escaped the demystifying, but the watch brands on this list? Not so much. Some of these brands are brands that you own. Others are brands you were about to buy from. Now, after this video, you decide if you want to buy or not. Number 15. Gucci timepieces. There was a period when a Gucci watch meant something. If you were the kind of person who bought Gucci bags and Gucci shoes and Gucci everything, the watch completed the picture. The logo on the dial was a signal. You were communicating your taste level and your income level at the same time. The problem is that Gucci tried to grow the watch side of the business into something it was not. They introduced higher-end references. They moved price points upward. They talked about watchmaking ambitions. The market's response was immediate and unambiguous. Nobody who wants a $5,000 watch wants a handbag brand's name on the dial. The person shopping at that price tier is a watch buyer, not a fashion buyer. They know what movements cost. They know what complications are worth. They are not going to pay serious money for a dial that tells the room, "I like accessories," when they could buy a dial that says, "I understand horology." The result is that Gucci boutiques in 2026 are sitting on watch inventory that moves primarily when it reaches the 70% off rack at outlet malls. The watches are not bad objects. A Gucci watch is perfectly functional. It just occupies a price point where the competition, Tissot, Longines, lower-end Frederique Constant, puts a proper movement in a properly priced case and makes no apology about what it is. The fashion buyer who wants the logo is priced out. The watch buyer who has the money doesn't want the logo. Gucci is stuck in between, from logo exhaustion to the brands that relied on logo confusion and got educated out of the market. Number 14. Armani and Versus. This entry covers a category, not just two brands. Emporio Armani, Giorgio Armani, Versace, and Michael Kors. Any fashion house that decided at some point that a watch was a natural product extension, the business logic was sound. If someone buys your clothes and your bags, they will buy your watch. Put a 50-cent movement in a case stamped with the logo and charge $300 to $800. The margin is excellent. It worked for 20 years because most buyers had no way to know what was inside. The watch looked expensive. The brand was aspirational. The price was enough to feel like a purchase rather than an impulse. The knowledge gap was the entire business model. That model is now broken. A teenager with a smartphone can identify any watch movement in 30 seconds. The ETA 2035 inside an Emporio Armani retails for less than $10 wholesale. A Seiko 5 at $90 contains a better-built movement, better water resistance, and a manufacturer that actually cares about the thing ticking inside its case. The knowledge that used to cost 10 years of forum membership is now 3 taps on a phone. Armani and Versace watches still sell. They sell primarily to people who have not yet looked up what is inside, and to tourists in airport duty-free stores. Both are shrinking markets. The future of fashion house watches is either to get serious about movements, which requires investment they will not make, or to accept that the category becomes purely a logo accessory at the $50 swatch price point. Neither of those outcomes is the business they thought they were building. From fashion houses to a house that makes great things, but is having an identity crisis about which great things matter. Number 13. Montblanc. Montblanc makes exceptional pens. They have made exceptional pens for 100 years. The Meisterstück is one of the most iconic objects in the history of luxury goods. It's a pen you give to someone when you want to say, "This matters." But the watches are a different story. Don't get me wrong, they aren't all bad. Some of them are genuinely good. The Minerva-powered chronographs in the upper range represent serious horology. The movement architecture in those pieces is something a watchmaker looks at with respect. The problem is that Montblanc has no singular iconic watch. They have a range, the 1858 collection. The Heritage Collection, the Star Legacy, each is competent. None is unforgettable. And in the watch world, the brands that survive the secondary market correction are the ones with an icon, a watch that the community points to and says, that one. Without that anchor, the entry-level Mont Blanc watch in 2026 is losing 40% of its value before the warranty card is fully signed. The person who buys a $2,000 Mont Blanc Heritage is discovering within a year that it trades for $1,200 on the gray market, not because it failed, because it has no identity strong enough to hold its ground when the emotional investment wears off. Mont Blanc knows this. The brand has been investing in its upper range specifically to avoid the commodity trap. But the entry tier is already there, and it is pulling the brand's reputation downward. From an identity crisis to the most absurd value gap in a major Swiss brand. Number 12. TAG Heuer Formula 1 Quartz. Let me explain this in the simplest possible terms. The movement inside the TAG Heuer Formula 1 Quartz is a Ronda quartz caliber. Ronda makes reliable, broadly available quartz movements. They cost somewhere between $15 and $30 wholesale. This kind of movement for a watch that costs around $1,500 to $2,000 depending on the reference. That movement is also inside dozens of watches that retail for $100 to $300. The precision of a quartz watch is determined by its oscillator quality and regulation, neither of which changes based on what name is on the dial above it. So, what are you paying for? The TAG Heuer name, or the Formula 1 marketing, or the brand becoming the official F1 timekeeper in 2025. The case construction, which is good. The bracelet, which is decent. The sapphire crystal, which you would expect at this price. All real things. But here is the test. For the $1,500 you spend on a Formula 1 quartz, you can buy a Tudor Black Bay 36. You can also buy a Seiko Presage with an in-house automatic movement that its manufacturer spent years developing, or a Longines Spirit with a COSC-certified movement and a genuine GMT complication. All three of those contain dramatically more watchmaking interest for the same money. The TAG Heuer Formula 1 quartz community knows this. That is why the secondary market on these watches has been soft for years. The people who buy them are the ones who have not done the comparison, from a movement problem to a brand that made the right watches for years and then changed everything. Number 11. Bremont. The Cerito era. Bremont, under Nick and Giles. English was built on something real, British manufacture, military connections, an ejection seat testing protocol borrowed from Martin Baker that every Bremont watch had to pass before it shipped. The brand had a community because the story was specific, verifiable, and belonged to no one else. Then, Bill Ackman's investment brought in Davide Cerrato. The brief was scale. Move the price down, move the volume up, go global. Cerrato is a skilled operator. He helped create the Tudor Black Bay. The brief was commercially reasonable. The execution arrived at Watches and Wonders 2024 as a complete reset. New logo, a compass rose the community compared to a navigation app. New collection, the Terra Nova, a cushion case field watch with no connection to anything Bremont had produced in 22 years. A repositioning from aviation heritage to land, sea, and air, a description so generic it could apply to any watch brand on Earth. By 2026, Bremont had produced a Felix the Cat, limited edition. A cartoon character on the dial of a watch descended from a brand that used ejection seat tests as a quality standard. The original community has largely sold their collections. The Terra Nova sits in cases. The watches are competent. They are also no longer Bremont in any meaningful sense. They are watches with a name on the dial that used to mean something specific and now means nothing in particular. From a brand that lost its story to a brand that lost its market position, and now LVMH is asking uncomfortable questions. Number 10. Zenith, the Defy Skyline. In January 2026, reports emerged from Swiss financial circles that LVMH had been conducting due diligence, the financial examination you do before selling a company, on Zenith. LVMH denied it. The denial was carefully worded. No plan for a sale. Not, we are not selling. Not, we never considered it. No plan for a sale, as of that statement, on that day. The denial lands differently when you understand what Zenith actually is. Zenith makes one of the genuinely great movements in the industry. The El Primero, which has been beating at 36,000 vibrations per hour since 1969, is a horological legend. Charles Vermont famously hid the tooling in the attic during the quartz crisis rather than destroy it, saving the movement for the mechanical renaissance. That story is real. That movement is real. The Defy Skyline is a different problem. It is a good-looking watch. The integrated bracelet, the star pattern dial, the 1/10 second indicator, it works visually. But the community's honest question is, why does this watch exist when El Primero already answers every question about what Zenith is? The Defy Skyline is Zenith trying to compete in the Royal Oak adjacent space, integrated bracelet sports luxury, where Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, and Vacheron Constantin have been for decades. Dealers have been offering significant under-the-table discounts on Defy Skyline stock. The collectors who care about Zenith care about the El Primero. The watch Zenith needs to sell to grow is the one the El Primero community ignores. If LVMH does eventually sell, the brand that survives in the buyer's hands will be the El Primero. The Defy collection is the overhead. From a brand with an existential question to a brand stuck between two audiences it cannot fully serve. Number 9. Baume & Mercier. Baume & Mercier is owned by the Damiani Group. The watch has clean designs, honest movements, fair build quality, and accessible prices. Nothing wrong with any of it. The brand is perfectly professional. It is also perfectly invisible. Baume & Mercier is caught in a demographic gap that is genuinely difficult to escape. Too expensive to compete with Tissot and Hamilton, where the value proposition is clear and the brand identities are strong. Not prestigious enough to compete with Longines, where the heritage is deeper and the brand recognition carries real weight. Certainly not in the conversation with IWC or Jaeger-LeCoultre, which are the aspirational upper end of what Richemont offers. Baume & Mercier is the graduation gift you give someone when a tutor is too much, but you want to look like you made an effort. The recipient will be polite. They will also trade it within 2 years for something that has a clearer story. The brand is not failing, it is fading. There is a difference. Failure is dramatic. Fading is quiet. Inventory moves slowly. Secondary market prices offer no encouragement, and a community presence never quite materializes. The watch that anyone would recommend over Baume & Mercier at the same price point is easy to name. This is the midpoint of the list. The bottom 8 were fashion houses, identity problems, and category traps. What follows is different. The next 7 are not cheap brands. Several of them are producing genuinely impressive watchmaking. The problem is not the object. The problem is what the market currently thinks the object is worth. Which of these surprises you most? Drop it in the comments. Let's go on. Number 8. Panerai. Entry level. The Panerai story is one of the best in watchmaking. Italian Navy, frogmen, Mediterranean operations. The crown-protecting device on the Luminor case, the lever that locks the crown, was an engineering solution for divers who needed to operate the crown through thick gloves underwater. The watches were rated to 300 meters because the people wearing them went there. Then Panerai made the Luminor Do. The Do is rated to 30 meters. 30 meters means rain is fine. Splashing your hands while washing up is fine. Swimming in it is not recommended. 300-meter Panerai owners operate at depths where 30 meters of water resistance would be meaningless. The crown-protecting lever is still there on the Do. The device designed to seal a crown against deep water pressure is being deployed against rain. Every time someone engages that lever on a Luminor Do, they are performing a ritual that was designed for Italian Navy combat divers. The watch cannot follow them into water past ankle depth. The entry Panerai community has noticed. Revenue drops of over 30% have been reported. Boutique incentives, the watch industry's polite term for undisclosed dealer discounts, are being used to move inventory. The brand is discovering that once you put 30 meters of water resistance on a watch built on a diving heritage story, the story stops working. The people who buy Panerai for the myth now have to explain why the myth does not extend to the pool. From a brand that diluted its story to a brand that charged for a reputation, it stopped backing with the product. Number 7. Hublot. Classic Fusion entry. Hublot's Big Bang is a legitimate watch, in-house movement, genuine case innovation, a visual identity so strong it defined a category. When you pay Big Bang money, there is something there. The classic Fusion titanium entry at around $10,000 is a different conversation. The movement inside is not in-house. The case is competent titanium. The dial is minimal without being disciplined. The bracelet integration at this tier is not the brand's best work. You are paying almost entirely for the Hublot name, for the association with the Big Bang, for the brand equity that the actual Big Bang built. The secondary market makes the argument better than any critic can. Walk out of a Hublot boutique with an entry classic Fusion and check its value 6 months later. You will have lost 30 to 40%. That is not a watch depreciating in the normal course of use. That is the market running a real-time calculation on how much of the purchase price was actual watch and how much was the story of being a watch brand. At $10,000, you can own a Grand Seiko with a spring drive movement, a genuine engineering achievement, or an Omega Seamaster with Meta's certification, or a vintage Rolex that holds its value. The entry Hublot is none of those things. It is a name at a price that the object cannot sustain once it leaves the story the boutique was telling, from a depreciation machine to the brand that charges legacy prices for non-legacy engineering. Number 6. IWC, Entry Portofino. IWC makes remarkable watches. The Portugueser, 7-day perpetual. The Pilot's watch, double chronograph. The Big Pilot. These are serious mechanical achievements that earn what they charge. The Entry Portofino earns something different. The caliber inside the Entry Portofino is developed from an ETA 2892 base. It is a reliable, broadly used movement that powers watches at many price points from many brands. At Jaeger-LeCoultre, the Entry Master shows you hand-finished movement bridges, decoration that earns the house's name. At A. Lang & Söhne, nothing leaves the factory without finishing that reflects what the house is capable of. The Entry Portofino shows you a gateway. A competent, honest gateway, but a gateway to the brand rather than into it. The issue is not the watch. The issue is the price. $5,000. In 2026, in a market where Longines offers COSC-certified movements with better specifications for half the price, is a strong ask for a movement that does not reflect IWC's genuine capability. The buyer who knows the IWC catalog buys the Portugueser. The buyer who sees the IWC name and assumes the entry price buys the entry experience and discovers within a year that the $5,000 bought them an introduction to a brand rather than the brand itself. Dealers are marking Entry Portofinos at below cost to move inventory. The secondary market price tells you what the market actually thinks the object is worth without the story. From a legacy brand at entry level to the brand that built something beautiful and then made too much of it. Number 5. Girard Perregaux. Laureato Steel. The Laureato is a genuinely impressive watch. The integrated bracelet, the octagonal bezel, the movement quality for the price. When you put a Laureato 42 inches steel next to a Royal Oak 15,500 inches steel, the case for the Laureato is real. There is the comparable design language, same integrated bracelet sports watch category, significantly lower price. That case worked when the Royal Oak was impossible to buy. During 2020 to 2022, when Royal Oak waitlists stretched to years and secondary market prices hit 3 times retail, the Laureato sold to everyone who wanted the aesthetic and could not get the watch. The Laureato was the answer to a question that had no other answer. The bubble corrected. Royal Oaks are more accessible. The wait lists shortened. The secondary market price on the 15500 came back toward reality. And the Laureato buyer discovered they owned the consolation prize that no longer needs consoling. The standard steel Laureato 42 now trades significantly below retail on the secondary market. The reference 81010, which retailed around $13,000, has sold for $8,000 to $9,000 on forums. The Aston Martin edition and limited edition collaborations hold value. Those are genuinely scarce. But the production steel models are carrying inventory pressure that the brand is working hard to manage. The watch is not worse than it was in 2021. The market is different, and a watch whose entire value case was built on the unavailability of a competitor is a watch in trouble when the competitor becomes available again. From a consolation prize to a brand that has a real engineering story and a marketing story that nobody can agree on. Number 4. Zenith, brand level. This entry overlaps with the Defy Skyline entry because the problem is bigger than one collection. It is the brand. Zenith has one of the most defensible movement stories in Swiss watchmaking. The El Primero, the column wheel integrated automatic chronograph that has beaten at 36,000 vibrations per hour since 1969, is the reason collectors care about Zenith. That movement is the brand's soul. The brand has spent a decade trying to build a second identity around the Defy collection, the Defy Lab escapement, the Defy Skyline's architectural case, the partnerships and collaborations. All of it is technically interesting. None of it has captured the community's imagination the way El Primero does. The result is Zenith is a brand with one great story that is not commercially large enough, trying to support itself with a second story that the market does not fully buy. LVMH analysts apparently looked at those numbers in late 2025 and reached a concerning conclusion. The denial that followed was not the confident denial of a brand that has no question to answer. It sounded like a brand that had the question answered for it and was waiting to see what happened next. The El Primero is worth protecting. The question is whether the commercial structure around it can survive long enough for the market to properly value what it actually is. From a brand under corporate pressure to a brand that made a brilliant watch and then overproduced it into a secondary market problem. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 3. Bulgari Octo Finissimo. Steel. Bulgari has broken the record for the world's thinnest watch multiple times. The Octo Finissimo Ultra at 1.7 millimeters. The thinnest tourbillon. The thinnest minute repeater. These are genuine engineering achievements that the watch press covers seriously, because they deserve serious coverage. The standard steel Octo Finissimo is a different market. At roughly $9,000 for the steel automatic, the Octo Finissimo is a beautiful watch. The Gerald Genta-inspired octagonal case, the ultra-thin movement, the case architecture that is instantly recognizable and entirely Italian in aesthetic sensibility. It is a watch that stands on its own design terms rather than borrowing from Swiss conventions. The secondary market tells you what the production volume has done to it. Standard steel Octo Finissimos trades at 25 to 50% below retail. A watch that retails for $9,000 can be found for $5,000 to $6,000 without much searching. The watch is excellent. There are simply many of them. Every time Bulgari released a new limited edition that was not particularly limited, another wave of owners of the previous edition updated their market price assessment. The complications and precious metal versions tell a different story. The skeletonized 8-day holds value. The tourbillons and minute repeaters command premiums. Bulgari's high-end is credible. The entry steel tier has been diluted by volume into an object that the market will not pay retail for. The brand knows this. The watch deserves better than the catalog strategy that created the problem. And on to the next one. Number 2. Bell and Ross. Bell and Ross had a great idea in the 90s. Take an aircraft cockpit instrument and put it on your wrist. The square case, the 4 screws, the highly legible dial. The tool watch aesthetic for people who liked the idea of tools without needing to use them as tools. It worked. For a long time it worked very well. The BR1 became a style object, worn in films, photographed on the wrists of architects and pilots, and people who wanted to look like architects and pilots. The problem arrived when the trend expired, and the brand had not developed anything beyond the trend. In 2026, a Bell & Ross BR3 retails for around $3,000 to $4,000 depending on the reference. The movement inside is typically a Celita SW 300 or equivalent. The case is well made but not exceptional. The bracelet and strap options are good. The design is still the design. And the design has been in continuous production for 30 years with incremental refinement, but no genuine evolution. The watch community now asks, why is this watch $4,000? The honest answer is, it isn't worth $4,000 in any measurable metric other than the brand's pricing decision. The Celita movement costs the brand a fraction of the retail price. The case tooling has been amortized over decades. The research and development overhead is minimal. The brand is running on the cultural capital it built in the 2000s, and that capital is depleting. The secondary market price confirms this. Bell & Ross watches trade significantly below retail. The person who paid $4,000 and tried to sell 2 years later learned that the market thought the watch was worth around $2,000. That is not a brand whose products hold value. That is a brand charging a premium for a design that the market has reevaluated. Number 1. Montblanc, the entry watches. Montblanc sits at number 1 not because it is the worst watch brand on this list, but because it represents the most instructive failure of the group. Every brand here has a problem with the gap between the story and the object. Montblanc's version of that problem is the cleanest and most teachable. Montblanc has a genuine heritage story. The Minerva manufacturer that Montblanc acquired in 2006 makes seriously important movement architecture. The upper-range Montblanc watches are respected by the watch community as legitimate objects. The entry watches are a brand tax. A $2,000 Montblanc Heritage Automatic contains a movement that a $200 Tissot competes with on technical merit. The case and dial execution are competent, but not distinctive. The design nods toward Swiss dress watch conventions without committing to the conventions or departing from them. The watch is the watch brand equivalent of a business reply card. It exists to start a commercial relationship, not to be the thing the relationship is about. The problem is that most people who buy the $2,000 entry watch think they bought Montblanc. They bought the label. The watch itself does not deliver what the Montblanc name was supposed to represent. The secondary market agrees. Entry Montblancs lose 40% or more within a year. The brand's own upper tier is doing what a Minerva movement is supposed to do, holding value because the engineering earns it. The entry tier is doing what every overpriced, engineered watch does, teaching its owners an expensive lesson about the gap between a label and a product. That gap, at every price point on this list, from the Armani Quartz at $300 to the entry Hublot at $10,000, is the same gap, a story the object cannot fully tell. 15 brands, different price points, different categories, different problems, same gap. Every brand on this list built value primarily on the story rather than the object. The fashion houses sold the logo. The heritage brands sold the name. The aspirational brands sold proximity to something more impressive than what they were actually offering at that price. For a long time, the information asymmetry protected them. Buyers couldn't look up movement costs in 30 seconds. The story was the whole market. The market has been educated, but not perfectly. There are still people buying entry Hublots at retail and fashion house watches at full price. But the direction is clear. The brands on this list are not declining because consumers got poorer. They are declining because consumers got smarter. The brands not on this list have one thing in common. At every price point they occupy, the object earns the story. The watch is worth what they charged for it. Not because the brand says so. Because when you flip it over and ask what is inside, the answer is satisfying. That is the whole game, explained. Buy something that passes the flip test. Everything else is marketing. So, which one of these surprised you? Which one are you going to look up right now? Let me know in the comments, like this video, and subscribe.